Welcome to In Focus with Ijaz Haider. Tonight we kick off with a discussion of India-Pakistan relations. Most observers are talking about a thaw. While the media on the Pakistani side has no stories with reference to any back-channel talks, some in the Indian media have been writing about who met whom and where. Whether this is speculation or the Indian government sources are feeding these stories is anybody's guess. At the Islamabad dialogue, signals from Pakistani Prime Minister and Army Chief have been misinterpreted by many observers, especially in occupied and illegally annexed Kashmir. That should be a cause for concern in Pakistan. While all keynote speakers at the Islamabad dialogue spoke about the imperative for peace and Pakistan's geoeconomics framework, they also referred to the ball being in India's court. Essentially, it's about we have extended a hand, now you have to create a conducive environment for this to move forward. And conducive environment is primarily about India's unilateral actions and the situation in Kashmir. Let's dive right into our discussion. I'm joined by Ambassador Sarwar Naqvi and Zamir Akram, both former diplomats, and Suhasini Haider, diplomatic and national editor at The Hindu. Let me kick off with Suhasini Haider here. Suhasini, as I said, we really don't have the story here, this side, in the sense that, of course, there is a back channel and people speculate, but what's appearing in the Indian media is, as I've said, is either speculation or is being fed by government sources. What is your take on what's appearing in the Indian media?
Thanks so much for having me on, Ijaz, and I must add over here to your preface to this question that in India, when you talk about the conducive atmosphere, it means an atmosphere free of terror. And that's something Prime Minister Modi said in his greetings letter to Prime Minister Imran Khan on National Day, March 23rd. When you ask about the back-channel dialogue, I agree with you. These are so far, sourced reports. Clearly, they come from high enough officials. We've had two in the last month from national dailies, very respected bylines, as well as two from international portals as well. Both Bloomberg and Foreign Policy have carried the story that not only is there a back channel, that back channel has been in place for several months. In fact, I'm sorry, there are three now, so there are 5 reports in all, and that the back channel has been facilitated perhaps there are many speculations about who's facilitated it. One of them says it's the UAE, the other has spoken about the US, others have spoken about China, and so forth. Now, the points I would make are twofold. One is that there has been no real credible denial of those reports on the Indian side. It would have been quite easy if they were completely untrue for the Indian side to have made the MEA or the Prime Minister's office or the NSA's office to have made a kind of plain denial. We do have that one denial from the special assistant to the Pakistani Prime Minister, Dr. Mohsin Yusuf, who said he was not a part of it, and essentially the DGMO ceasefire was a product of discussions on the ground. But what we do have by way of some evidence that there is some kind of a back channel, that the DGMO ceasefire was the product of a larger conversation, perhaps on some steps moving towards peace, are the following. One, a softened rhetoric on both sides. You refer to the Islamabad dialogue, but I would take you back a few months now and talk about what Prime Minister Khan said when he was in Colombo, what General Bajwa said at a defense academy at the beginning of February, and then follow it up with all the statements on that side. I think on the Indian side, we're seeing it as well when it comes to the Prime Minister's tweet, for example, wishing Prime Minister Khan a quick recovery, or Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla talking about India's desire for peace in the region, speaking about Pakistan without necessarily mentioning the common the kind of wording we always have, which is about terrorism, cross-border terrorism. We are seeing a softening of the rhetoric outside of this sphere as well. Then we see sporting events. You might think sporting events are not that important when it comes to strategy, but the first sporting visa is to be given in 3 years, one to the equestrian team from Pakistan, another to a shooter. That, I think, is of some significance. We're also seeing in other areas where the Indus Water Treaty, for example, has been held after a gap last year, and before that, even it seemed, unlikely that the talks might be held at all. So we're seeing a series of engagements. Let's see what happens when the two foreign ministers are expected to be in Dushanbe next week for the Heart of Asia conference. But I would certainly say at a time when, for example, Afghanistan, events over there are at a peak. There is so much coming out from Afghanistan about the future plans, the US's proposals. We're not really seeing that kind of rhetoric coming out of Delhi and Islamabad aimed at each other that we have seen in the past. So I would say there are enough indicators for us to be able to speculate that there is a larger process at work, but it has not been confirmed at an official source.
Right. So I agree in the sense that, in fact, you talked about going back, and if we really won't go back, then I'll go back to the interview that Dr. Moeed Yusuf had with Karan Thapar. And he actually gave Karan a big story, but Karan didn't really pick that up. The other thing, the important point that you're making is that the Indian government has not denied these reports. But I was referring to some of the reports that actually, refer to who met with whom, and I think that's kind of either speculative, highly speculative, or deliberate leaks by the government.
Correct, and they are, as you said, very specific. They also go back to a specific timeline, talking about October as the time when there have been these meetings. As I said, as a journalist, we can only try to get confirmations. Clearly, we have not got those confirmations, or I would say that to you directly, but we have also not got denials. And we have asked again and again, please confirm or deny these reports. Now, if there are 5 reports out there, all by very, very respected bylines in Indian media, that point to one kind of speculation, as you said, and no denial on that, then people will make the conclusions that we are drawing as well.
Right. Thank you so much. It was Suhasini, Haider speaking with us. Let me now go straight to Ambassador Naqvi here. Ambassador Naqvi, once again, and this is also contained in Mr. Narendra Modi's letter to Prime Minister Imran Khan, terror. Now, we have said, we meaning the Pakistani side has said that we absolutely want to talk about terrorism. We've got a dossier. And here's the dossier. We've sent it to the Secretary General's office also. But the Indian reference to terror, of course, is in a certain context. So when we talk about the conducive environment, and frankly, I'm not really at this point impressed by visas and the rest of it, what exactly are we looking at?
The Indian approach of labeling Pakistan and constantly playing up the allegation of sponsor of terrorism, source of instability in the region, epicenter of terrorism and all that is perhaps now being modified by the Indian government, because the Prime Minister's message to Prime Minister Imran Khan, Indian Prime Minister's message, and the President's message to our President, and the ceasefire before that on the LOC seems to indicate that there is some realization that this will not play well indefinitely. There is a time for trying to change tack to adjust to present situation, Biden administration, and the global situation as it is emerging.
But so, Ambassador Naqvi, interject here. The issue is that, as I said in my opening also, that there is a sense in occupied and illegally annexed Kashmir that Pakistan has probably thrown the issue under the bus. Now, as I also said in my opening, that should be a cause for concern. And therefore, while there is this story brewing in the Indian media, And as should be clear from what Suhasini said, the Indian government is not denying it, and a lot of this must also be coming from official sources. They seem to be now controlling the narrative. And so that is something that needs to change.
Yes, they think they are doing that, but we have our perspective and our thinking on the subject. Regarding Kashmir, you see, I have always maintained that Article 370 or 35A, that doesn't concern us. That's Indian law, Indian constitution. We never recognized all that, and therefore we continue to maintain and have always maintained that Kashmir is disputed territory, and there can be no sort of way by which India can sort of create any status for it or deny a status to it or whatever. Now, we maintain that so still, and so far that position has held and will hold. But we are now willing to engage with India, which we have said always. So there is consistency in our position on both counts. And we would like to sort of address issues. Now, I, as one who has been a practitioner of all this, feels that the whole thing is not going to get very far unless there is some change in the stances. Now,
Okay, right. Now, hold this thought there. Let me pull in Ambassador Zamir Akram here also. Ambassador Akram, my concern is, as I said, that the narrative is now being controlled by the Indian media and the Indian government. So, one, we need to change that. Secondly, we also need to be very cautious about the fact that, this whole thing about giving visas and sending letters and the rest of it is fine. But this is also a way of, it's a diversionary tactics to move away from the centrality of certain issues that must actually determine the kind of relations that India and Pakistan can have.
Well, I think that you are absolutely right. In view, it doesn't really matter who started the process and how it started. I have a view on that. We can talk about it. But I think I agree with you that there is a very good possibility that this is an Indian diversionary tactic to engage and offer talks to Pakistan to basically deflect the kind of pressure that India has been coming under, including from its friends in the United States, because the US wants India to focus on China and on the quadrilateral alliance and lower the temperature vis-a-vis Pakistan. And so that, I'm sure, is the advice that Biden has given them, that you should seek some kind of lowering of temperatures and confrontation with Pakistan. That is one thing. The other is that the Indians, after having faced the Chinese in Ladakh, realized that they cannot afford to be involved in a two-front situation against Pakistan and China at the same time, and therefore they are trying to find a way to somehow decrease the pressure on the Pakistani side. As far as Pakistan is concerned, we have always offered a dialogue, but we have also stated after the Indian actions of August 2019 that they need to reverse what has happened or what the steps that they have taken. And for me, the most important step is not Article 370, but 35A, which means that they are trying to change the demographic character of occupied Kashmir and reduce the Muslim majority into a minority. And that can have a devastating impact if and when a plebiscite or referendum is held in Kashmir. And that's exactly what the Indians would like to do. So this is what has motivated the Modi government. And I think that now we will need to see how the Indians conduct these talks. If it is a repeat of the earlier positions that they have had, where they engage in talks but do not come to any substantive conclusions or even a substantive dialogue on how to resolve these problems, then we will see that this is only a facade of a dialogue and not really an effort to resolve outstanding issues.
Right. Now, so here's the thing. This whole, talk of terror, a word that is also, in the letter that Mr. Modi sent to Prime Minister Khan. One of the points that I believe we should be making is that a number of such events that have happened and that India has tried to tag on to Pakistan, interestingly enough, going by the Indian media itself, inquiries have come up with nothing. They have been inconclusive. So I think one of the things that we want to tell the Indians and the rest of the world is that, okay, let's have independent inquiries into what happened at Pulwama, what happened at Pathankot, what happened in Uri and the rest of it. And I think that is something that we need to the point that we need to make more aggressively so that we can yank them out of this constant sort of mantra of terror that they keep harping at.
Ijaz, I have never seen a letter of felicitations on a national day that has been sent by Mr. Modi to our Prime Minister. These kind of letters are not occasions to raise these kind of issues, and he has done it quite clearly. So I think that we should not be putting too much, giving so much importance and assuming that there is a change of heart on the part of the Indian leadership, simply on the basis of this letter, which is quite clear he wants to keep the focus on the issue of terrorism, which is fine. As far as I'm concerned, we have enough material to accuse the Indians of sponsoring terrorism against Pakistan, and we should not shy away from a dialogue on this issue. As far as what you have mentioned, this is something that we have said in the past, that we can have either a joint investigation or we can have an international investigation into these Indian allegations of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism regarding specific incidents. But the Indians have always rejected either a joint investigation or an international third-party investigation into these things, because I believe that most of the so-called evidence is either not there or it's all cooked up. And that's why they have rejected any kind of external involvement in such investigations.
Right. Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi, allied with this point, and I think as Ambassador Akram said, that we have in the past made this point, but I think we need to constantly make it. We need to ensure that it gets traction and it gets registered, even if India does not accept third-party investigations or joint investigations. Secondly, it seems, as I said in my opening, going by the Kashmiris commenting on social media platforms, that they think that Pakistan's gestures of peace and the signaling is getting fast-paced, and they cannot see anything in return. I mean, just the other day, 4 Kashmiris were martyred, houses were burnt down, razed to the ground. That's a practice that goes on. So give me your sense of whether we should now put the brakes on this constant signaling of peace and then at least wait for what the other side does.
I entirely agree. In the first place, regarding the question of independent investigation, I am sure the impartial observers will take it as a very sincere offer. But we have done this many times in the past, and I don't think it has, gone anywhere because the Indians don't cooperate in the matter. Whether it be any kind of mechanism here, regional or bilateral, or it is a broader international mechanism, it doesn't matter. The Indians just won't cooperate. Now,
no, but here's Ambassador Naqvi point. I'm not talking just about the official to official channels. I'm talking about creating and controlling the narrative through social media, through getting attraction for this, so that people actually know, not just the government officials, but the people at large should know that this is what Pakistan has been offering and this is what India has been rejecting. We need to get out of the simple sort of, narrow official channels business. And that's not how narratives are built.
That's a good point. I agree with you for the reason that earlier, before the evolution of the social media dimension of communications, it used to be, official level bilateral meetings, or at best 1.5 track 2 or things like that. But now we have the social media as another big channel of communication, another big avenue of information to be propagated. So I think we should use this social media opportunity to make the point that there should be investigation, independent investigation of all these events. It goes back even to the Parliament attack in 2002.
Absolutely.
Which was extremely suspect, in fact, as later events or disclosures showed. So I think we have to do that, and we should do it, and we should avail of this new opportunity where the social media can carry our narrative far wider than it has ever been the case. But the point is that after all that, where do we go? I mean, I agree with you, we should not jump at this offer and say that, fine, now things are looking much better. I think it's an Indian game, and they are merely responding to some kinds of pressures that they are undergoing, and they don't want to. Even when we agree for talks, for example, Ijaz, we only talk about talks, what kind of talks we'll have. But once the talks begin, the Indians are totally non-cooperative. For example, look at the nuclear restraint regime. It's on the table for all these years, and the Indians have refused to even talk about it whenever we have raised it in our...
Absolutely, because they pull in China, and that's since China is a nuclear weapon state, obviously, that's something that they refer to rather than to Pakistan. That's part of their rhetoric. But thank you so much. That was Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi speaking with us. Ambassador Zamir Akram, give me your sense of how you think we should play this. Because as I said, this narrative is now being controlled by India. Kashmiris are feeling a sense of despondency. And I think that should be a cause for concern for us. So how do you think we should play this?
Just a few days ago, during this security dialogue, the foreign minister's statement talked about our policy on Kashmir, and he made it very clear where we stand and how we need to pursue it. I think that is our policy, and that should be the basis on which we should project our position going forward in engaging with the Indians. And before we even start talking to the Indians, I think it is absolutely imperative that we need to be in consultation with the Kashmiris in occupied Kashmir. We need to have them on board. They need to know that we are not going to betray them, and that we are not, and that's precisely the kind of message that India would want to send to the people of occupied Kashmir, that Pakistan is talking to us, and you, the Kashmiris, should better get used to the fact and give up this struggle for their freedom. So that's the kind of messaging that the Indians are going to be making to the Kashmiris, and they've done that in the past. It's not that we should be surprised about it. Any one of us, like me, I've dealt with this issue for so many years. I know exactly what their game plan is. They will engage with us. There will be no progress. They will go round and round in circles, and eventually another incident will take place, and the process will collapse once again.
Absolutely.
That's the way it will happen. But in the process, they will gain the time to consolidate their positions in occupied Kashmir and try and convince the people of Kashmir that they've been betrayed by Pakistan. This is not the kind of message we should be sending to across.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. That was Ambassador Zamir Akram speaking with us. We shall take a short break and return to discuss the rising COVID cases in Pakistan. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. As Pakistan's major urban centers see rising COVID-19 cases, with positivity reaching 8.6%. As a matter of fact, for Lahore itself, it's upwards of 12%. This is the national average. The government has again gone for a lockdown. Hospitals are reporting a higher patient load, even more than the first wave early last year. The government, which delayed the procurement decision by more than a month, is grappling with consequences of that delay. The COVAX supply it was banking on has also got delayed. And as a matter of fact, I just noted that Dr. Faisal Sultan said that that supply is now going to come in April. The decision to allow the private sector to import the vaccine is also being criticized. A case in point is a letter written by former Justice Nasra Iqbal, chairperson of Transparency International Pakistan. In any case, the vaccine that has reached the port in Karachi cannot be distributed because there is a price standoff between the importer and the Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan. To discuss this further, I'm joined by Dr. Samia, Altaf, Professor of Practice in Public Health at the Lahore University of Management Sciences. Dr. Altaf, we delayed the decision to place orders and procure the vaccines by more than a month. In fact, we were the only laggards in this regard as far as this particular region is concerned. Now, of course, there is criticism of importing it through the private sector. The positivity ratio is climbing up. Lahore, in fact, is becoming an epicenter of sorts of this. So give me your sense of what's going on.
Yes, thank you very much, Ejaz. Ejaz, you are right that there is kind of a lot of concern and a lot of anxiety about what's happening. But, for people like us, and you and I have also been talking about this, that, this was to be expected. When epidemics happen, there is a certain trajectory to the epidemics that one keeps in mind and plans for that. What is distressing for us is that, we and our government is, in a sense, is the tail wagging the dog. We are chasing behind the epidemic. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that, our systems are not so robust. Our procurement systems are not so robust. So we actually need to start on these things earlier on rather than later on. So obviously, the numbers are rising because this new variant is a much more infective variant, and it is also infecting a lot of young people. And that is to be expected. That is in the nature of this epidemic. This is not a surprise. It should not have been a surprise for anybody. For me, what is distressing is that why is it that we are not looking at the science and we are not looking at what the numbers are and what is happening and planning for that? I am very distressed by the fact that the government does not have the skill set that is needed for these kind of long-term, large systems planning. you know, that, and there is nothing wrong with that. You know, there is enough of this expertise available in the market. They can procure that expertise and tell those experts to put together a plan which is consistent with Pakistan's constraints. You know, we cannot constantly be downloading stuff from the CDC and WHO websites. Those people are, you know, giving us very good guidance, and they are giving guidance to the country. But the fact remains that these kind of delays and and God knows what will now happen in distribution once the distribution starts. And add to that what you and I have also talked about before many times on your program, that on the demand side, you know, the public is not at all interested in this. There's a lot of vaccine hesitancy that the government does not seem to be taking into account. That even if you bring the vaccines to the people's homes and close to their arms, what guarantees that it will be placed into their arms? Because there is a lot of information on the internet about the experience of the vaccine in the other countries, you know, which people interpret in whatever way they want to interpret. So this whole thing is very, very confused. And you know, I and people like us are very distressed that there is no proactive, coherent planning which is consistent with our challenges and our constraints. You know, we are a poor country. We are a resource-constrained country. And one of the resources that is most constrained is human resource. And the Ministry of Health has a huge deficiency in technical human resource, which they need to take seriously into consideration. And, you know, Faisal Sultan needs a lot of help putting together all of that. You know, he is in that position where he is responsible, but, you know, he can't do it alone. NCOC is doing the operations part of it, but, you know, they are not the technical people. So when will we wake up to all of this?
Right. So here's how I look at it. Just to kind of, you know, sum it up, that A, we're lucky, and really we have no idea why we were lucky during the first and the second waves in terms of lower mortality rates. Heaven forbid if the mortality rates had gone up, we obviously did not have any policy to you know, tackle that. Now, on the one hand, we delayed procurement of vaccine. On the other hand, the vaccine that we do have is not getting to the people because there is a lot of hesitancy, including among the health workers. So a number of questions, and stay with me, Dr. Samia Altaf. I'm also joined by Dr. Mohsin Abbas, who's Clinical Research Associate and Chief Counselor for COVID vaccine trial at Shifa International Hospital. Dr. Abbas, one, we delayed the procurement. Two, now we still have some vaccine because lots of people are not interested in it. So do you think we really have a policy? Did we, or whatever policy that we formulated, did we actually factor into that policy a lot of these variables? And vaccine hesitancy, of course, is something that we already know with reference to other vaccination, polio and the rest of it.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I want to say that the policy did not include much of the awareness campaigning, because there's one front that we lacked so much on. Because if we look at the percentage of people who are not willing to vaccinate, Pakistan has 22% people who are not willing to get vaccinated. And it's the largest number compared to any other, even third world or first world countries. So other than that, the policy also did not include the exact strategy as to how we're going to fund this and how are we going to purchase these vaccines. And we're still, you know, by and large, we are still not very neck to neck with the demand and supply of the vaccine. So these two issues are very crucial and very critical. And the third part is that right now we have started with the vaccination with the frontliners and those of 60 above. But we still are lacking in creating awareness about the vaccines and the myths related to it, the misconceptions. And it's not just coming off of very illiterate people, but it's coming off of very educated people. They also believe in the conspiracy theories, and people are not that willing to take it in the first hand. Even if they were to be willing to acquire a very solid plan, which can include all our population, which is 23, 24 crore. If we don't do that, we will have to face another wave and then another wave. And not just that, if we look in the past, we are still struggling with polio. We're still struggling with the EPIs, because we haven't been able to educate people that polio vaccination is necessary, and people still believe that it's just a conspiracy.
Right. Thank you. That was Dr. Mohsin Abbas speaking with us. We go back to Dr. Samia Altaf here. Awareness, obviously, but even with a lot of awareness campaign, I think, and I'm not saying that we actually did a campaign on that count, but even with, for instance, as far as polio is concerned, there's been a lot of awareness campaign, and yet we know how people have often reacted to that. So give me your sense of the scenario that you think is likely to unfold in the coming days, because one way of, sort of overcoming this vaccine hesitancy is also, and I think other countries are going to do that, because people who are going to travel would require, a certificate of vaccination. So how do you look at the scenario? How is it likely to unfold?
Yes, Ijaz, you are right. You said in the beginning that for whatever reason we have been lucky that we did not see so many deaths in our country. People have now started to do research and find out, and there are now credible evidence that countries like Africa and South Asia that have had a very contaminated environment where a lot of other diseases and other viruses, they have kind of a cross immunity. It's possible that people have cross immunity. So whatever it is, thank God that we did not suffer so much. But the scenario doesn't look very good, because one sees that happening, that there will be a COVID vaccination passport required by other countries, and then of course we will stop. There will be fly-by-night organizations and outfits that will start stamping up a COVID passport to you and start giving it to you. So we want to avoid those kind of things, because this is a very serious disease. It is here to stay. It is not going to disappear overnight. And the countries actually, according to their own conditions and their own constraints and their own challenges, they need to do something about it. The communication campaign, as Dr. Abbas has mentioned, is a very important and a critical part of these large public health programs. And just making announcements on television and just distributing pamphlets does not work. There is a large body of science behind this, which says that when you want to give some health-related information and communication to people, who are adverse to it, what is the methodology, how it should be done, how it should be packaged, in what language, in what other related services along with it. There is enough evidence and enough of that. I would urge the government to literally become serious, and accept this fact that there is science behind every component of building a large public health system, right, in which, you need to bring technical expertise to that and put together that science in a plan which makes sense for a country like Pakistan. Otherwise, there will be chaos, Everybody will do whatever they feel like doing, and people will then just start buying these certificates, which are COVID passports, and traveling. Because ultimately, the international travel inside and outside of Pakistan is what will suffer. And then it will be discrimination. You must have had AstraZeneca vaccine. You must have had the Chinese vaccine. You must have had this vaccine and that vaccine. You know how this is. I even shudder to think what the scenario is going to be.
Absolutely. So, that's another variable that we need to factor in. But thank you so much. That was Dr. Samia Altaf speaking with us. This is all from In Focus this week. We shall see you next Monday at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.